Nothing unsettles a man more than starting to suspect that the woman he shares his life with is no longer fully there. Not because of physical distance, but because of that invisible disconnection you feel when someone starts looking elsewhere. At first, everything seems the same, but something shifts. The silences, the looks, the small excuses that pile up until they turn into noise. That uneasy intuition, the voice that says something's off, never shows up without reason. And yet, many choose to deny it because accepting what might be happening hurts more than pretending nothing's wrong. But facts can't be denied forever. They only hide until the soul gets tired of lying to itself. Every man goes through, sooner or later, that moment when trust starts to mix with doubt. It's the point where the mind searches for logical explanations, but the body already feels them all. And that's where the real conflict begins. Am I overreacting, or did something actually change? Many justify, others snoop, some drown in guilt for being suspicious. The truth is, no one ever taught us how to read a woman's silences or recognize the signs of emotional distance. That's why this video isn't meant to feed paranoia, but to help you see clearly, to tell the difference between a passing phase and a real betrayal. Because when you understand the signs, you stop depending on fear and start relying on truth. If this is your first time here, I'm Celia. I've spent years helping men understand female psychology and rebuild their sense of self after confusing or painful relationships. My goal isn't to make you distrust all women, but to help you protect your peace and recognize when something is fading. Stay until the end, because in the last part we'll talk about how to recover if you find out your suspicions were right. Let's begin. When a woman starts getting emotionally involved with someone else, the first thing that changes isn't her words, it's her habits. Any attentive man can notice it, but few dare to face it directly. Changes in her routine are like small cracks in a wall that still looks solid. It appears the same, but the structure isn't. Maybe she starts coming home later than usual, has unexpected meetings, or shows a kind of tiredness that never existed before. The excuses sound reasonable, but their frequency starts to stretch credibility. What matters isn't one isolated change, but how consistently it repeats and how she justifies it. A faithful woman can have difficult days, but a woman who's emotionally involved with someone else begins to reorganize her time without including you. Until now, we've talked about intuition and the feeling that something doesn't add up, but this is where intuition becomes concrete observation. A man who pays attention to detail understands that fidelity doesn't break overnight. It fractures slowly through small decisions. When someone starts building a parallel life, they need time to maintain it. That's when new routines appear, schedules shift, and plans become vague. It's not paranoia, it's logic. If your presence no longer fits into her agenda, it's because her attention is somewhere else. Sometimes the changes aren't in what she does, but in what she stops doing. She stops telling you about her day, no longer shares simple decisions, or starts showing a kind of forced independence. If she used to ask for your opinion and now seems to have everything figured out on her own, chances are you're no longer part of her mental process. That doesn't always mean there's someone else, but it does mean you've stopped being her emotional priority. What used to be natural, telling you things, asking you, sharing, turns into a comfortable silence. And silence is the first language of distance. You also need to notice the emotional contrast. A woman can still go through the motions of being in a relationship, but do it mechanically. She's there physically, but the spark is gone. If she used to make plans with you and now prefers to be alone, if she once sought connection, but now seems drained by conversation, the change isn't about mood, it's about the bond. When a woman starts to disconnect, her body moves the same, but her energy shifts. It no longer flows toward you. It flows toward wherever she feels excitement. That's why it's essential to look beyond the obvious and see the pattern. If every change has a different excuse, if every unexpected event seems designed to justify her absence, that's a symptom. And it's not about spying or confronting without proof. It's about becoming aware. Because when a relationship revolves around one person trying to understand and the other trying to hide, there's no communication left, only strategy. And where there's strategy, transparency disappeared long ago. Changes in her routine are the starting point because they reveal where her energy is going. If her life begins to revolve around places where you don't exist, don't ignore that sign. She doesn't need to say it with words. The time she takes away from you is the most honest confession you'll ever get. And understanding that isn't weakness, it's maturity. Only someone who observes without fear can decide with dignity when to keep trying and when to stop justifying what's already changed. Now then, with that said, let's talk about the second sign. Today, the phone is the clearest reflection of intimacy. What used to be hidden in letters or glances is now kept behind a screen. That's why, when a woman starts guarding her phone as if it were an extension of her skin, something has shifted. Not necessarily because of physical infidelity, but because of emotional distance. She used to leave it on the table carelessly. Now, she takes it with her even to the bathroom. She once showed you photos without hesitation. Now she locks the screen with an almost automatic motion. The phone becomes a boundary when its contents turn into a territory you no longer have permission to enter. Up to this point, we've talked about how habits change in daily routines. But here, her digital routine tells its own story. The notifications she used to answer in front of you are now handled in silence. Messages that used to be simple are now protected by new passwords or brushed off with excuses like, "It's work." The interesting thing is that it's often not even about hiding something specific. It's about maintaining a sense of control and secrecy. And that need for secrecy doesn't appear out of nowhere. It begins when her attention starts dividing between you and someone else. A revealing detail isn't just how she uses her phone, but her energy while using it. If she looks at it and smiles in a way she no longer smiles at you, if she instinctively shields it when you come close, if she gets uneasy with your questions, or irritated when you notice her distraction, her reaction speaks louder than any message. What changes isn't the device, but what it represents. The phone becomes the bridge between two worlds, yours, growing quieter, and the other, growing livelier. That boundary solidifies when spontaneous conversations turn into defensive arguments. Asking calmly about something simple can trigger an exaggerated response. "Don't you trust me?" Or, "Why do you have to check everything?" That discomfort doesn't come from your mistrust. It comes from her unspoken guilt. Someone with nothing to hide doesn't feel the need to protect every move. And someone guarding something so fiercely knows deep down they're risking the trust that once existed. Still, this isn't about invading her privacy or checking her phone. What really matters isn't what's on it, but the change in openness. When communication becomes a minefield, respect has already turned into suspicion. You don't need evidence to know something's off. Your body senses it before your eyes do. In that moment, the most valuable thing isn't finding a message, but regaining your clarity. Because the phone doesn't destroy relationships, the emotional distance built through it does. And when that boundary goes up, the challenge isn't to cross it, it's to decide whether it's worth knocking on a door that no longer wants to open. Trust can't be demanded, it's felt, and once it's gone, no screen can bring it back. One of the most painful signs to recognize is when the physical connection starts to fade. Not because desire suddenly disappears, but because the soul is no longer present in the encounter. A woman can keep going through the motions, doing everything that seems normal, but if her mind is no longer with you, her body reveals it without saying a word. She no longer seeks you out, or if she does, there's no real passion, no spark that used to ignite with just a glance. What was once a space of closeness now feels forced, as if every gesture were done out of obligation or to avoid an uncomfortable conversation. By now, you've seen how changes in her routine and the way she uses her phone start creating distance. But here, that distance becomes tangible. The closeness that once strengthened the relationship turns into tense silence, into an effort to keep up appearances. And I'm not just talking about sex. You can see it in the hugs, the kisses, the way she touches you, or avoids doing so. When a woman is emotionally invested in someone else, her energy shifts, and even if she tries to act normal, her body betrays her. This isn't about how often it happens, but about how it feels when it does. If there used to be desire and now there's only routine, if you notice that she's there but not really there, that her mind seems miles away while you're trying to connect, it's not your imagination, it's real disconnection. The woman who once looked at you with tenderness now avoids your gaze, and that absence of warmth says more than any excuse ever could. In that lack of enthusiasm lies a truth that no words can hide. Many men justify this distance by blaming stress, work, or exhaustion. But when the reasons are always external and never include an "I miss you," you're not facing a temporary phase, you're facing an emotional withdrawal. In those cases, insisting only drains you further. The most common mistake is trying to rekindle desire through pressure, guilt, or desperate displays of affection. That only pushes her further away, because intimacy can't be demanded. It must be felt. What you need to do at that point isn't beg, but observe with calm detachment. If the connection is broken, your job isn't to assign blame, it's to protect your dignity. Forcing closeness only confirms that the bond is gone. A woman can still share your bed, but when her energy belongs to someone else, you'll know it, even with your eyes closed. The body doesn't know how to lie. And before we continue, I want to ask you something. If this topic is making you reflect, or if you see yourself in what I'm describing, take a moment to subscribe. It really helps when you leave a like and a comment with your name and country. I love reading where you're all from and how each story is experienced differently. If you want, you can share your story or offer advice to other men going through something similar. I read everything you write, and believe me, it makes a huge difference in this work. Now that you understand how desire shifts when the connection cools, I want you to pay attention to how the body keeps speaking, even when she tries to hide it. The body is the first traitor of a lie. It can say, "I love you," with its lips, while the shoulders tense or the eyes look away. No woman can maintain natural physical contact when her mind is elsewhere. And that, more than words, is what gives her away. Body language becomes a silent mirror that reflects everything no longer spoken. Maybe she still hugs you, but without holding tight. Maybe she still kisses you, but without closing her eyes. Maybe she still smiles, but the smile doesn't reach her eyes. Empty gestures are the new form of emotional distance. When a woman starts getting involved with someone else, her body changes its rhythm. Her movements become tenser, her touch less spontaneous, and above all, she begins to avoid prolonged contact. If she used to reach for your hand while walking, now she keeps it in her pocket. If she used to sit close, now she needs space. She does it almost unconsciously, as if her body were saving its energy for someone else. It's not that she's openly rejecting you, she's protecting herself. She maintains a distance that didn't exist before, and that's her most subtle way of pushing you out of her emotional space. By now, you've seen how intimacy fades and how the body mirrors that disconnection. Here, the difference is that you no longer need to listen to what she says. You need to watch how she behaves. A man who observes calmly can notice that she avoids holding your gaze, cuts short hugs that used to last longer, or that her tone softens or turns sharp when you try to get close. Even her walk or posture shifts, straighter, more reserved, more alert. She's no longer comfortable around you because she already feels watched from somewhere else. Eye contact says it all. She used to look at you directly and with warmth. Now she only looks when she needs something or feels she has to. She avoids holding your gaze because doing so would mean facing the truth. And nothing makes someone hiding something more uncomfortable than being looked at by someone who still trusts them. That tension between what she pretends and what she feels creates awkward gestures and small contradictions. She acts affectionate one moment and pulls away the next for no reason. It's the conflict between guilt and the desire to conceal it. At this stage, many men focus on finding proof when the proof is already right in front of them. Body language is the most honest confession you'll ever get. If she no longer relaxes around you, if her presence feels distant even in everyday moments, you don't need a conversation to know it. Love is visible, and so is its absence. The most important thing is not to turn observation into pursuit. This isn't about analyzing every move or becoming a detective. It's about regaining your clarity. When you observe with calm, you understand that not every distance means infidelity, but every infidelity begins with distance. And when the body withdraws, it's because it no longer finds safety in yours. Now that you know how to read what her body is trying to hide, I want you to notice how that same shift shows up in her surroundings. The people she starts spending time with, the places she begins to go, the new friends who seem to appear out of nowhere. When a woman starts seeing someone else, her environment changes long before she admits it. The first thing that usually shifts isn't how she talks to you, but who she talks to when you're not around. New names appear, co-workers you've never heard of, friends who suddenly become her go-to excuse for going out, or simply a schedule that starts filling up with plans that don't include you. Those social transformations are silent signs that her world is rearranging itself around someone else. Up to now, you've seen how her body begins to pull away and physical contact grows distant, but here, the distance becomes social. A person's circle reflects their priorities. If she used to spend time with you and your friends, but now criticizes or avoids them, what she's really doing is detaching from your world to move more freely in hers. It's a way of creating space where her double life doesn't collide with yours. She starts separating her environments, the couple's life and the personal life, which in truth is no longer as innocent as she claims. It's not always done with bad intentions. Sometimes her environment shifts as a result of an attraction she doesn't know how to handle. Maybe at first she just wanted distraction, new company, or to feel something different. But that new group becomes the stage where she can explore without feeling watched. And when a man notices that his woman begins talking about people he doesn't know, going out more often with vague excuses, or getting overly defensive when explaining who she was with, the warning light is already on. It's not jealousy, it's emotional logic. Someone involved elsewhere needs to build an environment that allows it. There's a clear pattern that's easy to spot. Outings that used to be occasional become routine, and the reasons for them conveniently change. Work, a friend going through a tough time, a family commitment. None of that sounds suspicious until it repeats with almost programmed precision. What matters isn't the excuse itself, but how unnatural it starts to sound. When stories begin to feel rehearsed, it's usually because they are. It's also common for her to start idealizing these new friends, or defending them excessively. She talks about them with enthusiasm but avoids giving real details. If you ask questions, she answers vaguely or quickly changes the subject. That excitement isn't just about those people, it's about the sense of freedom and secrecy they represent. In that new dynamic, she feels alive in a way she may no longer feel with you. And as painful as it is to accept, that's where emotional separation truly begins. When you notice these kinds of changes, don't rush to confront her. Observe. The truth always reveals itself, because these separate worlds can't stay apart forever. They eventually overlap, and the contradictions expose her. What you can do is stay calm and maintain your frame. Don't lower yourself to chasing her or questioning every outing. The man who loses control loses respect, and the woman who's already detached often looks for that loss of control to justify her choice. The circle around her reveals more than you think. If she no longer shares what she's doing, isolates herself, or starts living in a world you no longer belong to, you don't need a confession. The truth is already showing itself. And when her environment changes, the relationship changes with it. Now that you understand how her outer world begins to shift, pay close attention to what happens within communication itself, because when words lose their meaning, silence becomes the new language of distance. When emotional connection starts to fade, the first visible symptom shows up in your conversations. You notice it when talking to her no longer flows, when every exchange feels like a chore or an obstacle. She used to tell you every detail of her day, ask for your opinion, share plans. Now her answers are short, dry, or evasive. The space that was once filled with words and laughter is now filled with uncomfortable silences. And those silences aren't peace, they're distance. By now, you've seen how her environment changes and how she begins building a parallel life. Now, the change happens within the relationship itself, in her tone, in the way she responds, in the emotional weight behind her words. If her voice once sounded warm and curious, now it's impatient or forced. When you ask how she's doing, she just says, "Fine." When you try to talk, she replies with phrases that shut down the conversation. There's no interest in connecting, only in ending the exchange as quickly as possible. This is the point where communication stops being a bridge and turns into a wall. One of the clearest signs is defensiveness. A woman who's hiding something reacts to the simplest questions as if they were accusations. If you calmly ask where she was or what she did, her tone sharpens or rises. She doesn't respond to the question itself, but to the discomfort of being observed. Then she flips the situation, making you feel guilty for asking, as if the problem were your mistrust and not her changed behavior. That's a classic emotional avoidance mechanism. Empty communication also shows in the topics she brings up. You used to talk about dreams, plans, or even silly things that made you laugh. Now it's all about practical matters, bills, schedules, errands. The emotion disappears. And when emotion disappears from the conversation, it disappears from the relationship. It's a gradual disconnection, but a clear one. She's not talking less because she's busy, but because her mind is already occupied elsewhere. Another indicator is her emotional tone toward you. There's less tenderness, less curiosity, and more indifference. Instead of being interested, she just tolerates you. It shows subtly. She sighs when you talk, changes the subject without listening, or interrupts you to check her phone. In those small, everyday gestures hides an uncomfortable truth. The conversations that once brought you closer now only serve to keep up appearances. When you reach this point, insisting on talking doesn't help. It's not about getting answers anymore. It's about accepting what her silence is already saying. If she needs to get defensive just to communicate with you, it's because she's already emotionally elsewhere. The absence of words is, in reality, a confession. Cold communication can't be fixed with more messages or long arguments. It can only be healed, if there's still something to save, with truth, calm, and boundaries. And if that truth never comes, your best response is serenity. Because someone who stays silent out of guilt can't stand the silence of a person who no longer needs explanations. And when you learn to hear what isn't said, you start to notice her energy changing too. She doesn't vibrate the same, she doesn't feel the same, and even the way she dresses or moves begins to tell another story. There are things that simply can't be hidden, no matter how hard one tries. When a woman starts getting involved with someone else, her energy changes before her words do. You see it in her eyes, the way she walks, how she dresses, even in the tone of her voice. It's not about her physical appearance itself, but the vibration she gives off. Suddenly, she seems happier, lighter, more interested in her looks. But it's not for you. It's for someone else. And as painful as it is to admit, that glow that once sought you out no longer recognizes you. Up to this point, you've seen how communication becomes empty and emotional distance seeps into her words. Now, that distance can be felt on her skin, in her presence. When a woman feels emotionally drawn to another man, her body reflects it involuntarily. Her posture shifts, her way of dressing transforms, she becomes more attentive to her appearance, or suddenly develops new grooming habits she never cared about before. Sometimes she even changes her perfume, her hairstyle, or her makeup routine. She's not doing it to feel better about herself, she's doing it to feel desired through a new gaze. There's also a subtle but powerful transformation in her energy. She starts moving with a different rhythm, as if something constantly fuels her, though she doesn't share it with you. That sense of lightness or mystery isn't random. It's the emotional footprint of someone who's feeling excitement again. And that excitement, no matter how much she tries to hide it, can't stay concealed for long. Her zest for life reignites, but you can tell you're no longer part of that spark. Sometimes the physical signs show up in the opposite way. She doesn't shine more, she dims. Some women, when they feel guilty, try to make themselves invisible. They put in less effort, tone everything down, avoid drawing attention. They think it hides what they feel, but the shift is still obvious. Because what really changes isn't the clothes or the makeup, it's their presence. A woman who's emotionally available radiates warmth. A woman who's pulling away radiates absence, even while sitting right beside you. This isn't about watching her every move or doubting every detail. It's about noticing the coherence between what she says and what she projects. If she insists everything's fine, but her body seems tense, if she says she loves you, but her eyes have gone dim, don't look for a rational explanation. Energy doesn't lie. What you're sensing is real, and denying it only distances you from your intuition. When her energy shifts, the relationship loses balance. You start to feel that conversations turn cold, silences grow heavier, her presence feels different. You're not imagining it. You're simply witnessing attraction redirecting itself somewhere else. That transition always leaves traces, even in the smallest gestures. And though it hurts, seeing these changes clearly gives you power. Because clarity is the doorway that lets you decide whether to confront, let go, or rebuild. What matters most is not losing your center or your calm. Seeing the truth doesn't destroy you, it frees you. Denying it, on the other hand, slowly consumes you. And when you understand that energy and accept it without denying what's right in front of you, it's time to notice something even more revealing. The contradiction between what she does and what she feels, between guilt and the urge to escape, that confusion that exposes her without her having to say a single word. In this sign, I want to talk about something more confusing than anything else: contradictions. That mix of affectionate and distant gestures, sudden attention followed by complete coldness. It's the constant swing between guilt and the desire for freedom. A woman who's emotionally involved with another man lives divided between two worlds, and that division shows in her behavior. One day, she's sweeter than ever, talks to you tenderly, seeks you out. The next, she's curt, tired, or simply indifferent. That emotional roller coaster doesn't happen by chance. It's a reflection of her inner conflict. These contradictions usually appear when she starts feeling exposed. She knows something has changed, but she's not ready to face it yet. In her attempt to compensate, she begins acting erratically. Maybe she surprises you with affectionate gestures, unexpected messages, or plans she hadn't made in a long time, and it throws you off. It makes you believe everything is fine, but soon after, she distances herself again. It's not renewed love. It's guilt disguised as affection. She's trying to soothe her conscience and keep up the illusion of normalcy. Up to this point, you've understood how her energy and body give her away, but now the mind plays its most confusing role. When a woman acts out of guilt, she tries to erase her tracks with forced displays of affection. She becomes kind, even accommodating, but there's something in her eyes that doesn't match. She's not really looking at you. She's looking at herself, trying to gauge if she's still convincing you. That ambivalence creates massive confusion in you. You swing from anger to relief, from suspicion to the urge to believe her. And that's where she holds the most power, because while you're searching for coherence, she's only searching for emotional balance. The opposite can also happen. She projects her conflict onto you. She accuses you of things you haven't done, blames you for her bad mood, or says you've grown distant when, in reality, she's the one pulling away. It's an unconscious way to justify her behavior, to turn her guilt into a supposed reaction to your actions. If you manage to stay calm, you'll see the pattern. The more she blames you, the more she's trying to hide her own mistake. The biggest mistake at this stage is reacting with anger or reproach, not because you're wrong, but because it gives her the perfect excuse to validate her guilt and cast you as the villain. When a woman is divided, she needs someone to embody the reason for her disconnection. If you stay composed, you take that refuge away and force her to face herself. It's in silence and calm where the truth becomes most uncomfortable. Contradictions are the final stage before the truth. When the bond can no longer hold, her behavior becomes unstable because she can't be in two places at once. And even though, Sooner or later, the pieces fall into place. You don't need to wait for everything to collapse to see what's already clear. If her actions and her words don't align, always believe what you see, not what you hear. Contradiction, at its core, is her way of telling you she no longer knows how to sustain what she's broken. And as hard as it is to face, recognizing it gives you back your power. The power not to stay where there's no longer respect or coherence. And once you understand that contradiction without seeking revenge, the most important step arrives, learning how to rebuild yourself, to regain your center, and to move forward without resentment, even if you confirm that everything you feared was true. I want to talk to you about that moment when the truth leaves no room for doubt, when suspicion turns into certainty and what you feared becomes real. That hollow feeling in your chest, the disbelief, the pain of realizing you trusted someone who stopped caring without warning. What hurts most isn't the betrayal itself, but the process of realizing that everything you thought was solid crumbled right in front of you. But it's precisely there, at that breaking point, where your rebuilding begins. Because what was done to you doesn't define you. What you do with what was done does. At first, the shock is deep. Your mind won't stop spinning, trying to understand, replaying every detail in search of logic. But betrayal has no logic, only choices. No one betrays by accident. It happens through a series of small, conscious decisions that break trust piece by piece. Understanding that frees you from the illusion that you could have prevented it. Don't fall into the trap of guilt. Trusting wasn't your mistake, it was your strength. The mistake was hers, for mistaking your trust for naivety. At this stage, the most important thing is to take distance, not from anger, but from clarity. If you're certain that infidelity happened, don't seek explanations or promises of change. A woman who crosses that line shows that her values don't align with yours. And someone who betrays once will likely do it again, because disloyalty isn't corrected with love. It's corrected with boundaries. If you forgive her, you lose something far more valuable than the relationship. You lose your self-respect. There's no negotiation possible when what broke was trust. Walking away isn't surrender, it's preserving your dignity. Plan your exit calmly. Don't react out of impulse or pain. Regaining your balance requires strategy. Embrace silence as your ally. Don't argue, don't beg for explanations, don't get caught in the game of blame. Calm unsettles more than anger ever could. It's in that silence that you begin to reclaim control over yourself. After stepping away comes the hardest stage, rebuilding. It's not about filling the void with distractions, but about refocusing on yourself. Reorganize your life, your routines, your body, your goals. Go for walks, get back to your habits, bring order to your environment. Every small action is a way to remind yourself that you're still standing. Movement heals what overthinking tries to destroy. If you stay still, you get stuck in the wound. But if you move, pain transforms into strength. And while you rebuild the outer, start working on the inner. Reevaluate your values, your boundaries, and the way you choose a partner. Not to become hardened, but to mature. Not all women are the same, but not all deserve your devotion. Learn to look beyond words. Notice the consistency between what someone says and what they show. A woman of value doesn't need to hide, play games, or take advantage of a good man's loyalty. Women like that exist. You'll find them, but only when you become the kind of man who doesn't need saving, but is chosen out of respect. Don't isolate yourself. Talk to people you trust. Reconnect with healthy friendships. Find activities that make you feel useful and alive. Solitude can be a space for growth, but isolation is a silent enemy. If you let resentment grow, it will turn into cynicism and keep you from ever loving freely again. Don't let one betrayal make you distrust the world. Allow yourself to heal, but without losing your essence. When you finally regain your balance, the most important step will come, forgiving yourself. Not her, yourself. For not seeing the signs sooner, for believing, for trying to hold on to something that was already broken. That forgiveness isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It means accepting that you gave your best and now it's time to do so again, with awareness. And when that happens, when you can look back without resentment, you'll realize nothing was truly lost. It was a lesson. Betrayal doesn't destroy a man who respects himself, it redefines him. No matter your age or your scars, you can always begin again, stronger, clearer, and braver. Because out there are still loyal women, women of principle, women who will recognize the man who knew how to rise with dignity. And that, believe me, is the most powerful beginning of all. Every betrayal leaves a mark, but what defines a man's future isn't the wound, it's what he does with it. Infidelity is a brutal test, but also an opportunity for a fresh start. If you've made it this far, you've already taken the most important step, opening your eyes, facing the truth, and choosing yourself again. There's no growth without loss, and even if the pain feels unbearable now, one day you'll understand that this too was necessary. That this breakup, instead of destroying you, forced you to rebuild yourself with more awareness, more calm, and more respect for your own worth. Remember something essential. You don't need revenge, you don't need to prove anything, and you don't need to compete with anyone. True victory lies in your peace, in being able to look back without hate, without needing to justify or humiliate. When you reach that point, you've already won. Because the man who stands firm after betrayal isn't the one who shouts the loudest, but the one who stays silent and keeps growing. That serenity, which now seems out of reach, will one day become your greatest strength. Thank you for staying until the end and sharing this space with me. I truly appreciate you for listening, reflecting, and walking through this process that I know isn't easy. If this content helped you, I invite you to subscribe, leave a like, and share your name and country in the comments. I love reading where everyone's from and seeing how this community grows across the world. Every word, every story, every piece of advice you share is part of what makes this work possible. Take care of your mind, honor your worth, and keep moving forward. Because once you reclaim your self-love, it becomes a strength no one can ever take away.